Morning. Another day, another real test. Today, we're doing it on the Lenovo Legion Duel 2. Now, you might be thinking Duel and 2 are the same thing, but no, there's an E, not an A. So it's Duel as in fight. It's the second fighting phone that they've made, apparently. Regardless, I'm going to take this phone and use it as my phone throughout the entire day. My SIM card is in here. I'm using all the normal apps that I always do on a phone. Plus, we're going to take photos on it and some of its competitors and put those up on the screen so you guys can see how it does, as well as kind of checking on the battery throughout the day and also talk about some of the things that I like and don't like about it. But on this beautiful spring day, first things first. Coffee, check. So this is a little coffee shop actually by my house on the way to the water called Blank Street Cafe. And I think the blank is like because most of their locations are carts, they could be on any street. So insert street here is the idea. But this one's actually got a really cute outdoor space in what used to be a 1950s diner like lot. And there's actually a bunch of different versions of the diner. First it was the Wythe Diner, then it was Q's, then it was Relish. And I remember it actually also being La Esquina, which is like a Mexican restaurant. But during COVID, this coffee shop opened up in it. They can't actually go inside the diner. They're currently using it for like their staff and like they have their meetings in there. And I asked them if they're ever gonna open it back up and they said, maybe, we're not sure, etc., etc. But either way, the outdoor space, especially during COVID, is very welcomed. Also, fun fact, Khalees's milkshake video was actually shot in the diner. Okay, now let's talk about the design of this phone. It is very much a gaming phone, for sure. It's also designed very specifically to be used horizontally. They've even moved most of the main components on the motherboard, etc., to the center to pull it away from where your hands would normally rest. And that means that most of the things that produce heat are there in the center as well, making it more comfortable for your hands, etc. What would a gaming phone be if it didn't have RGB? So of course, we have RGB for the Legion logo on the back, which you control with an app on the phone. Interestingly, we also have two fans for cooling, and those also have LEDs as well. You can control one of them via that same app. Now, the idea behind these is that if you're gaming for a long period of time, these fans have a little copper chamber in between them, and they're meant to again, pull more heat away from the device, which then allows the CPU and all of the other components to run a lot harder for a lot longer, because as things get hot, they actually start to get throttled. And so if you can keep the phone as cool as possible, you should have a longer sustained performance. As for the screen, we have a 6.29-inch AMOLED FHD Plus display, and it has a peak brightness of 1300 nits. Doesn't mean anything to me. The only thing I really care about is here in direct sunlight, I can see the screen, so I'm happy. Now we also have 144 Hertz display on here, which means that the image on the screen can be refreshed up to 144 times per second. And that just makes using the phone, the navigation on the screen, scrolling, etc. a lot smoother. And of course, importantly for this phone, games can use that 144 Hertz to make the gameplay a lot smoother, which could be beneficial in some games. Now, the only thing is you have to make sure and check the games that you play, how high of a refresh rate they support. If they don't support 144, then even if this has that screen, it's not going to do you any good. So just check that out. And now I've turned on the 144 Hertz for this phone, so let's see what that does to the battery. Pardon the crazy wind and the subsequent crazy hair, but we're now in Domino Park. And it was originally named for the Domino Sugar Refinery, which is what you can see right behind me. Now, this was all originally built in 1856 by the Havermeyer family. And then after a fire, it was rebuilt to the current complex in 1882. And this operation became one of the largest of its kind at the end of the 1800s. It employed 3,000 workers, and it was making something like 13,000 barrels of sugar a day. It was even one of the 12 original companies in 1894 to be included in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Now, eventually, with all of the industries here on the water in Brooklyn, times changed, technology changed, and slowly declined. This place was still making sugar, though, all the way till 2004. At the end of 2004, though, it shuttered its doors and just kind of lay empty. Until one company came up with a plan that everybody seemed to like. Now, that plan included giving away a decent portion of the apartments that were there at under market rate, called affordable housing here in New York City, as well as having a large outdoor space that was open entirely to the public. That outdoor space is now called Domino Park. And the designers of the park even used some of the mills and the syrup tanks and incorporate those into the park to kind of show, heritage of the sugar factory that was here before. Also, the building behind me was named a landmark, and so no one could tear that down. All the other buildings have been torn down, and actually other buildings have been built in their place. But this one, they're keeping the outside, and they're going to redo the inside, and also build something on top that's like a market or something. Should be interesting. All right, but while we're sitting here, let's talk about the performance and, of course, gaming on this phone. Now, it's running a Snapdragon 888 processor, and my spec sheet that I have says up to 16 gigs of RAM, but I was told in an email that there's up to 18 gigs of RAM, which is just ridiculous, frankly. Regardless, it's as snappy as you expect it to be, like any of these gaming phones are. Something that I did think was interesting is apparently there's a 720 hertz touch sampling rate. Now, what that means is the screen itself, even though it refreshes 144 times a second, it can detect touch, like whenever you tap the screen, 720 times a second. And so, I can't tell a difference, but the idea being that during gaming, if you were to tap a button to fire the gun in the game, it would happen a lot faster. OnePlus did it with the OnePlus 9 Pro, but they did 360 hertz, and that required the developers of the games to actually tap into that in some way, so it only worked on very specific games. I assume this probably is the same, and maybe I just haven't had a game that runs at that hertz, but I'm also on pre-release software, so whenever it's finally released and we have final software, I guess we'll see. Regardless of whether it's 720 hertz or not, it is very responsive, for sure. And for gaming, I feel like I have a hard time justifying gaming phones, because they all have these crazy processors, and the performance is really good, but it's kind of the same as most flagship phones. Now, the cooling might come into play if you're playing for a really long time. Maybe you'll have better sustained performance than a normal phone, but even those have a decent cooling systems. But the one thing that I do think is interesting is when they have controllers that are purpose-built for the phone, or in this case, touch-sensitive areas on the phone that you can use the phone like a controller. And this phone has more than any of the other ones. We have 8, technically. We have 4 on the top. There are 2 on either side, the right and the left. And then we have 2 more capacitive touch ones on the back on either side of the logo. And then we also have 2 force touch areas. Real unique naming there, Lenovo. But those are 2 sections on the screen itself that if you tap with a little more force, you'll get a different action than if you just tap the screen. And I do, again, think that that's pretty cool. That's actually a good use case for this being a gaming phone versus any of the other phones. The question though becomes instead of using, say, a controller with one of those flagship phones, is this better? You guys tell me in the comments below. Love to hear from you. This is a place called Roberta's. And this is actually a 2 Michelin starred pizza place that originated in Bushwick. It's what I would probably call gourmet pizza. It's It's wood fired, but it's like super charred, really thin crust, really chewy, lots of really interesting ingredients, but a bit pricier than like your average like New York slice that you might get, drunk on the way home. They opened a new location over here at the water in Domino Park during COVID. And frankly, it's a lot closer to my house than the other location, so I'm excited to try it out. Pretty good pizza. Okay, real quick though, let's talk about the cameras on this phone. We have two dual rear cameras that are oddly placed in the center of the back of the phone. Now I'm sure this is for reasons that I mentioned earlier, but it will take some getting used to. We have a 64 megapixel camera with an f1.9 aperture, that's our main camera, and we have a 16 megapixel ultra wide camera with an aperture of f2.2. Now the camera does have a 2x option in the viewfinder as well, but this is just a digital zoom of the main sensor. There is no telephoto camera. For video, it can shoot up to 8K in 24 frames a second or 4K in 60 frames per second, and it has a unique front-facing camera that pops up when you activate it. It's a 44 megapixel camera and can shoot in up to 4K 60 and is apparently live stream ready, allowing you to use it while, say, playing a game and have your reactions show as you play. And it has built-in streaming for YouTube and Twitch. Now, another thing about the cameras that I thought was interesting is a director mode, like we've seen on some other devices. But this lets you record all 4 cameras at once as separate videos. The zoomed in one, again, being a digital zoom, but it still records it, oddly enough. And it's kind of cool if you want to maybe use all of those different shots to create like a multicam video when editing. And finally, I like that you can actually use the Motorola shortcuts, because Motorola is now owned by Lenovo, to twist to get the camera to launch and chop to get the flashlight to turn on. Okay, now we're at the other half, Brewery, which is really far from Roberta's, which was there. It's 2 doors down. But regardless, it was started by 3 guys who, quote, wanted to create a beer that they wanted to drink and a company that they wanted to be a part of. And this is their actual 4th brewing location, and beers are actually brewed here. The one I have here is the SNES. They also have a Sega. The Sega has more alcohol. I don't know why, but that feels appropriate. But, real quick, let's talk about a few more things on this phone. So for software, it's powered by Android 11 and has ZUI 12.5 on top. It's fine. Some things seem a bit weird, like typos, but it's snappy enough thanks to what's under the hood. And I do at least appreciate the fact that it has Android style for a theme, and that allows you to theme the device as if it were a normal Android device instead of the Lenovo very gamerish skins. So I prefer that. But I imagine there are plenty of people who, buying a gaming phone that looks like this probably wouldn't mind the gamer skins that come along with it. We also have an under-display fingerprint sensor, and it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. We also have 2 USB-C ports, like we've seen on other gaming phones, and just like that, both can be used for charging, which is good when you're wanting to charge while also playing a game, so it doesn't get in the way of your hand. Oh, and even with those 2 fans that I mentioned, the device is still IP58 certified, so it makes submerged up to 1 meter or so for about 30 minutes. Okay, calling it a night. It is 10:02 p.m. and we are at 6%. And here's my screen on time and my usage for anyone who's curious about that. Also, just so you know, I took it off its charger at about 8:30 a.m. As far as battery life is concerned, I think that's actually pretty good. I used this phone a lot, and I took it off pretty early in the morning, and I made it all the way to 10 o'clock, so not too bad at all. Now, at the moment doing this video, I don't actually know the price of this phone. They haven't told me, but I do know the price of the old model, and so let's assume that it's around the price of the lower-end flagships that are out. So at that price, you kind of have to decide if a gaming phone is really worth it. Because as I mentioned before, the performance and all of that, like there's very few scenarios, unless you're hardcore gaming, like over a long period of time, that cooling is really gonna make a huge difference compared to, a normal like flagship device. And then you have to take the things like the camera versus most flagships and the size and all the other stuff. Is it worth paying almost the same amount of money, if not the same amount of money, for a pure gaming phone as opposed to a flagship phone that is just good at gaming? I don't know. You guys let me know what you think of this phone, of this video, the format. Always appreciate you guys giving me feedback on that, I'm trying to improve the series. But also just on gaming phones in general. Does anyone out there buy them? Let me know. As always, I'll leave a link below to the best price for this device that I can find. Also, links to all of the places that I visited, because you guys have asked for that before. If you like this video though, please thumbs up or share. It's greatly appreciated. Also, check out the rest of the channel. If you like what you see there, please subscribe and ding the bell next to it, subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. As always though, regardless, thanks for watching.